So, like Sakshi said, welcome to Meaningful Equity in Building Decarbonization with 3 of the staff members of the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition. I'll introduce us all in just a second here. All right. So Midwest BDC's mission is to develop and implement equitable strategies to achieve zero emissions from the Midwestern building sector by 2050. The key word there is equitable. That's really what we're going to be diving in on today. And so we know that everyone defines the Midwest a little bit differently, and some of us might be from states outside of this Midwestern region, but we define our 8 priority states as Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio, Missouri, Indiana, and Iowa. If you're from, I know we have some Kansas people I've talked to today, so if you're outside of there, no stress, we welcome you. We're glad to be here. All right, you're welcome. And our facilitators for today, myself, Maggie Heiser, I'm our Communications and Digital Marketing Manager at Midwest BDC. I'm based out of Columbus, Ohio. We have Maureen Jackson, our Executive Director from Pontiac, Michigan, and then Edward Davis II, our Director of Grants and Development from Detroit. All right, and so real quickly, just to start us off, I'd love if we could take a moment to do introductions just within your table group. So feel free to share your name, your organization, where you're joining us from, since we have that regional spread. And then also feel free to go ahead and dive into what drew you to attend this workshop today, what was interesting about it, what you hope to learn. And we can just take 5 minutes to do that real quick.
I'll start, I guess. Hi, everyone. So my name is Katie Ricky. I'm the president of the Sustainability Office.
Oh, everyone's like,
Actually,
you want me to my chips and my
Oh,
there was a lot of variety.
like I saw this look up or my name is Rosanna, which is a cookie for a cheesecake.
Yeah.
It's like the adult version of
We're
at home today. My name is the beginning.
Hopefully to help identify resilience hub and as well.
I particularly workshop because CDN we're
Our community is marketing wide action area. And then yes, we're working on a
for that worry.
with our local resource academy and our company area, our local education union, as well as the Indiana Department of Work.
Oh, lovely. I don't.
My name is Jasmine.
One of the presenters, Davis.
I think one of our biggest priorities is direct the office of
Nonprofit.
I've only been in the work for 18 months. That's why it'll be
the final.
I'm Abby.
Here.
housing is one of
About
teaching.
We still have a long way to go.
Really, something not only does actually jobs. Has been in here.
And I hope they're all addressed.
Our campus is going to thrive. It's going to be leading edge.
I.
You don't have to.
Not just faith. Doesn't look like.
You might be a subscriber of our.
Yeah, you might be writing.
I don't know if I want to find that.
Anything.
You don't have to write later.
I don't know. It's something that I'm.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
We can see them from.
I know, yeah.
We're just going on.
Opportunity for,
Not really. I
Just doing introduction.
yeah, I work for the office.
I run something.
of Building Clean Energy State, so I'm interested in this workshop because there's like a whole person.
I want to
because we have
All right, I'm going to call your attention to that. Anybody gets no worries. We're going to have a late time for interaction. This will last.
Yes, like this.
Hold that thought. We're going to continue right now.
Apologies.
So let's get aligned on our goals and outcomes for today's workshop. So we're hoping that all of our participants will come to an understanding of equity, and equitable decarbonization. Some of the questions we're going to ask are, how do we come to a shared definition of equity? How can equity be defined differently in different circumstances? How can we slow down and do our work right the first time instead of coming back after the fact and trying to correct and realign and that constant kind of revision process? And then how do we navigate the concerns and needs of community? All right, now I'm going to hand it over to Marnice Jackson to lead us in a temperature check exercise to kind of get us started on the interactive elements of today.
All right. How y'all doing?
Good.
Oh my gosh, I know, we just ate lunch, we're tired. Guess what? I get to be the one who make you all get up and do stuff. So let's all get up. I know. Gotta do this, Marquise. Alrighty. All right, so there's a lot of power in this room, right? And so when we talk about equity, we are centering people who are marginalized, who have to bear the brunt of these harmful emissions. And so with equity, we have to center those individuals. And that usually looks like Black, Brown, Indigenous, low-income communities of color, okay? So within this room, we all have a position of power. Since we are in this space, we are privileged, okay? We are able to get here. We are able to talk to people. Some people don't have the financial means to do that. So with equity, you're here to make sure that we advance that. So I need everybody to put up their right fist, because this is a symbol of power. Okay? We're not going to talk about white power because you know what that kind of looks like, right? If you know what that, you got it. Okay, so y'all get it. Okay. But we're going to talk about people power because there's a lot of people in this room. We all can make an impact. So everybody look around at the people. So we're talking about equity. You all have a positional power to advance equity. And we're going to talk more about what equity is. So get those hands up. Everybody say power to the people.
People.
I just get emissions out the air. We're trying to eliminate these polluting facilities that are in Black and Brown communities. We're trying to save the world before, I mean, it's really rough out in the streets right now. If you're from Michigan, we get 70-degree weather one week and then, just never know. So let's get these hands up because we got a lot of work to do. All right, everybody say power. Power to the people.
Power to the people.
Okay, so, Sandy. So do you think it's important that people should have access to solar? If you don't believe that, sit down. Believe it, keep standing. If you think it's important that people should have access to solar or any other renewable energy, I'm talking about geothermal, not those false solutions like nuclear, all that, no, the real stuff. I believe it. Okay, I'm just trying to get a temperature check, see where we at. Okay. You think it is wrong to shut off a person's utility if they cannot afford to pay the bill? If you believe it, up. If you don't believe it, sit down. Okay. All right, so this is good. All right, so you guys can sit down. Okay, I had to.
Okay.
I never know what I'm gonna get.
Meeting room.
Okay.
Oh, you're good.
They're like.
And we don't like to make any assumptions, right? Because everybody come to this movement or building decarbonization from different walks of life, okay? So just to level set, what is building decarbonization? Let's start back with decarbonization. It is the reduction of or elimination of carbon dioxide emissions from a process such as factory or production. So building decarbonization refers to activities and programs that reduces greenhouse gases emissions from buildings. So think of these things humans do currently use all fossil fuels, and they fall into 3 buckets: transportation, cars, buses, airplanes. And bring at the table to focus on that. Industrial processes, when we're using fossil fuels or key to process materials or powering manufacturing. Commercial buildings, residential buildings. This is the one we are focused on, and include all the gas or propane, wood, and that helps a building function. So we want to transition off of that. This mostly means heating, hot water, and cooking. So there is our 4th category that feeds into all of these, and that's electricity generation. And it's important to recognize too often fossil fuels are still used to produce electricity to cars, factories, or in our case, buildings. Even though this occurring away from building itself is still carbon and pollution that exists because of the building. And by the way, in the Midwest, we are the biggest polluter of emissions by way of our buildings. So we like to think of the decarbs, we all heard of them, reduce, replace, reduce. However, we like to think of what we need to do is reduce. That means the amount of heating and cooling use of shifting energy use from high peak times. Once replaced, converting appliances like stoves, water heaters, and furnaces from fossil fuels to electricity. And then renewables supplying the building's energy needs, a carbon-free source. To reduce or energy efficiency, this means minimizing the amount of energy a building needs to be healthy and comfortable. So for the global decarbonization, this currently means reducing the need for heating and water heating. This could include urbanization work like sealing, gas, or increasing wall and roof insulation. It's also community switching out older heating, implementing new, more efficient models. This also ties into the part two that I replace or electrification. One, the energy needs have to be reduced as much as possible, and we want to replace appliances that are fossil fuels in order for our homes to be operating. And so at the Midwest BDC, we see that as an intersectional issue because we want to replace all these issues. Yes, it's a contributor to climate change. However, it's a health issue because living in a home that has gas appliances has harmful home, not just in your home, but then there's also outside your home. Those health impacts could include respiratory diseases like asthma. And so that could be also an economic burden on individuals who may not be able to afford that care. So, going to the third part, renewables or providing carbon-free energy. We want our business to be highly efficient, electrify homes and businesses like carbon-free electricity. This also could mean on-site renewable energy like rooftop solar panels. It also mean ensuring that purchase electricity from a utility that is carbon-free. So yes, that's the hard part because a lot of utilities hooked up to the gas infrastructure. And they do not kind of want to transition off of that, unfortunately. So why buildings? So the climate crisis intersects and will require us to change many things. And so why focus on buildings? Because 35% of carbon emissions in the US came from residential commercial buildings. And this was the first US Information Administration and Homes Convention. That's not too far away. So this is because like, I'm sorry, so far away. Okay, so scientific research tells us that we need to be at net zero annual carbon emissions by 2050. And the American Institute of Architects estimates that approximately 8% of buildings we will in 2050 are already built or under construction. So the typical lifespan of heating, water heating equipment is around 20 years, and building shells and electrical infrastructure must last longer. So buildings must decarbonize in parallel with the electric grid to meet the climate goals and climate targets. And so this is what it looks like, okay, and nationally. So the Midwest, where we're at, is 26% of emitting emissions into the air between Russia and Japan. So between two countries, that's where we land, 26%. So we're the problem, and all that emissions is coming from, so that's why we have to act aggressively. However, we must pay attention to this because we don't want ideas that will hurt communities that are really impacted. And so why the Midwest? Because we have colder climates. We used to have purple politics, but it just depends on where you at and how you look at it. And so we have to move aggressively in the Midwest because we're on the biggest. So with equitable building decarbonization, it's just that we have to focus on equity and just to question, who has heard of equitable? Great. So I'm like a volunteer to tell us, what y'all think it is. Okay, that's all I got.
Oh, go ahead. Don't do it way faster.
To me, equitable building decarbonization means focusing on reducing the methane gas powered heating plants and removing gas powered appliances in individual homes in Black and brown neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods, in neighborhoods that have not been invested in properly for decades first. And try, because a lot of times those neighborhoods are also where you have more pollution from, you know, other industries as well. So there's overlapping air pollution in the area. So start removing things there first, decarbonizing there first.
You want to add in?
I would just say, like, when I think about equitability, I think about accessibility. It's just having access, knowing is one thing, but knowing how to apply it is something else. And I think in a large part of our BIPOC communities, like a lot of times they know that there is a resource out there, but they don't know how to access it or have a capacity to actually access it. So when you think about equity in communities that are largely disinvested and under resources, like having the people to actually like access the resources.
Those are, you know, spot on, but I wanted to add also, you want to?
I was just gonna add a piece. We're often thinking about decarbonization until you bring in the equitable lens. You look at how to reduce the most emissions the most quickly. We're all under this time crunch. That's often not also prioritizing equity. There's a lot left behind there. And so you have to recenter the decarbonization.
So thank you so much for doing that. And so us recognizing all of the three pieces that you said, equity is also making sure that the impacted the most, in reality, have to be a part of these decisions and be part of the process that we all are a part of decision making. So, you know, a lot of us are in the political, and a lot of us are seeing money that's coming down internationally, nationally from our governments. However, the part is that or the marginalized communities are missing in these decision-making process. And the unfortunate part is that, yes, act on climate change expeditiously. Yes, we know that. However, unfortunately, with that type of thinking, sense of urgency thinking, have ideas or decisions that are not centering and will continue to be in front of these climate issues. So just think of it differently when you're thinking about your programming, your advocacy, that you have to have community service, community organizations at the beginning, as an afterthought, right? Because that comes off as a missionary, climate missionary, or it comes off like savor conference. Black and brown communities, that's just, they need the resources. To be quite honest, we need the resources and to be upfront when these decisions are being made. So to keep moving, and to do that, we have to follow the HMS principles for democratic organizing. These have been around for decades. One, to be inclusive, to have a bit emphasis on bottom-up organizing, let people speak for themselves. Like, if you know you're not from a Black and brown, indigenous, or low-income community, not hire people or tokenize people to speak for them. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Work together in solidarity, neutrality, build just relationships among ourselves. Yes, we know we are all are trying to get a job done, advance building decarbonization or any other. Okay, this can go across movement. Okay, to advance what we're trying to do to save the world, but we have to build those relationships among ourselves and others. And then during this time, you have to commit to self-transformation, meaning that, hey, you find out that you are perpetuating white supremacy culture. Okay, and I know that's a lot to take in because there's white fragility. That's a lot to take in when you're trying to help. And we all understand that. However, it can cause harm to these. Okay, So I'm gonna pass it over to Eddie, and he's gonna get some definitions and get us caught up. But right. I need time to turn on.
Well, okay. Okay, I'm gonna go over a few definitions for us here. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Climate justice is a term used for framing global warming as an ethical and political issue rather than one that is purely environmental or physical in nature. Energy justice is one of the central global issues of our time with profound implications for health and welfare, freedom and security, equity and due process, and technology development and implementation. Global warming also refers to the Earth's rising surface temperature, while climate change includes warming and the side effects of warming, like melting glaciers, heavier rainstorms, or more frequent drought. You know, I want to say something real quick right there about the climate change. I had a conversation. So when I'm not doing this work with Midwest BDC, I'm also a registered lobbyist in our state capital in Lansing, but also in Washington, D.C. I was having a conversation with a member of the House of Reps before they left for break, for spring break, and we were talking about climate change, and we were walking around D.C. and he said, man, you know, it's unseasonably cold right now for this time of the year. And I said, well, you know, climate change and what's been going on, that sort of thing. And he was like, no, it just, our weather, our temperatures are cyclical. They go in cycles. I said, you don't think there's something wrong with that? You don't think that there's something there? He was like, no, I just, I'm a believer and I think God is just doing his thing and whatever. I'm like, okay, I'm a believer as well, but I think what's going on, and he was from West Virginia. So I was like, of all the people that would have an idea of what was going on with the burning of fossil fuels and things like that, coal mines and everything, you would think that he would, but I didn't go into that. We were looking for a place to eat. I just focused on where we were going to eat. Just kept the conversation moving. But I just thought that was interesting about, people when, have different opinions on climate change and what's going on with our now. Global warming is one symptom of a much larger problem of human-caused climate change. Climate change in neighborhoods, displacement, redlining, gentrification, housing problems, lack of political power, and emergency management intervention and takeover. And within Black and people of color communities are the most impacted by environmental injustice. Environmental racism is nothing new, as we know. Race is the most significant predictor of a person living near contaminated air, water, or soil. 56% of the population near toxic waste sites are people of color. People of color have seen 95% of their claims against polluters denied by the EPA. They also have been 38% higher in nitrogen dioxide exposure and are 2 times more likely to live without potable water and moderate sanitation. Some examples statewide, within Detroit, Michigan, Detroit's 48217 zip code, which is over 80% Black, is home to a massive oil refinery and the most polluted zip code in the entire state of Michigan. Within Los Angeles County in California and LA County, Black and Latinx residents experience greater rates of asthma hospitalization than white residents. And within Louisiana, the Isle de Jean Charles band of the Biloxi Choctaw tribe became the country's first climate refugees, in part because logging and oil extraction activities eroded much of their island's home. Now, we want to talk about a little bit about building decarbonization at the local level. And this is within the work that we do within Midwest BDC. So a lot of work with Justice 40 and the Climate Funders Justice Pledge, Midwest BDC commits 40% of our annual budget to funding community-based organizations decarbonizing buildings at the local level. Our empowerment grants are available to community-based organizations that are working at the intersection of decarbonization and equity, market transformation, consumer inspiration, public policy, or research. These grants prioritize Black and brown people of color and or frontline communities. The grant period is 1 year and the grants range in amount from $10,000 to $50,000. So as the grants and development director for Midwest BDC, that's my job, is to oversee this program. What we do is, the process is that we send out a questionnaire to folks. We first look at folks who got the grants like the previous year. We ask them, kind of give them the update of what their current situation is, are they still in need, and then we ask them to apply based on that. We then move into folks and we send out a cast of wide net, a survey of folks who have expressed interest in this sort of granting program. And then we get back those. We have a committee within our organization that meets to look at all the applications that come in after we cut the deadline off. And then we go and look at each application, and we have a scoring system that we utilize to kind of see, based on the information they provide on the application, their income levels, other areas of need, whether it be, bills of some kind, with utility bills, water bills, things like that. We take in a whole bunch of things to kind of figure out how we tier folks before we give the money. Today, Midwest BDC has distributed over $1.5 million in funding, and here are some of the success stories and lessons learned from these community groups. We have the Pembroke Hopkins Park Community Development Corporation, which has received an empowerment grant to fund their Pembroke Hopkins Park Energy Efficiency Pilot, in which they electrified homes in the historically Black rural communities of Pembroke Hopkins Park. The lesson learned we took from that is it takes time to build trust, as Marie said, in communities, especially when presenting projects that deal with changing something as intimate as a person's home, and especially in communities that have been taken advantage of before. Another thing I want to say too is, as relates to that, is that folks, because they have been marginalized so much in the past, were old, bait and switch sort of thing that a lot of the communities have experienced. It does sometimes that plays against them, and you feel bad for, not a sense of pity, but you feel bad that these things, you have to come behind a lot of those things in these communities when you talk to folks who are trying to receive some of this funding. And I know just from experience from the work that we do, when we go and have conversations with folks in the community, you almost kind of dread, not because of having to talk to another person and hear another story, but it's like, dang, this real stuff is really going on. And I'm knocking down barriers of stuff that I wasn't even born, to even know about. But when they're telling you the stories, we have one of our communities right outside Detroit, Highland Park, used to be that's where actually the first Henry Ford plant started, when they did introduced the Model T and everything. Used to be one of the most sprawling, most expensive cities and well-off cities in the United States. Now it's very desolate. When you drive through there, there's abandoned buildings, there's large swaths of land everywhere. And we went and talked to some of the homeowners in that area, and we talked to them about, in terms of doing this program in their area, and just to hear some of the conversations they had about, oh yeah, I've heard this program before, and yeah, such and such came 2 years ago and said they were going to do this and that. They took all my information, and I never heard from them again. Next thing I know, I'm getting a bill showing up in my mailbox for whatever. And to hear a lot of that stuff going on is the things that we are, as a group, as a coalition, are experiencing on a daily basis. So these are just some of the things that you have to think about when we're looking at equity. Yes.
That's in, which state is that in?
It's in Illinois. Yeah, I'm just speaking on a personal thing that we do, from here, and we did it in Detroit. And Marnie's is gonna do what is a coalition?
You, Mike. Okay, so yes, so with coalition building and bring people together for a cause, to eliminate fossil fuels in buildings before 2050, that's our mission. We know that individual organizations, and I'm a part of a lot of different organizations, that we can't do this alone. And coalition building is a place where we all come together to do this work that we couldn't do independently. And so, I think coalition building is definitely needed in times like this. However, sometimes it's hard to mesh, people together within coalitions because everyone don't have the same values. Everyone don't have the same, the same values or the same priorities. And so within our coalitional space, we were definitely intentional in the beginning, when we first got started back in 2019, with making sure that we look at our individual organizations and members' priorities, through our priorities of discussion, and then also make sure that everyone is coming together and understanding how do we coexist together, because building decarbonization is with a lot of technical organizations, buildings, trades, architects, engineers, utility implementers, and then we have our grassroots environmental climate justice, civil rights organization, and then we have individuals. So everybody's coming to this movement from different walks of life. And so I think that's the beauty of equity and building, advancing that and building conversation, because we're all coming together like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to make sure that we're working together. And I think that's the beauty of any movement if you can do it that way. So, and these are some, like I said, these are some of our members at another conference, and we all come to convene with each other. But during this process, as we got started, we wanted to make sure that we have shared language and how we come together. So that's called, and as principles, commit to self-transformation, because this was a long process. Like, some people didn't know what, basic of how do we dismantle injustices? What does that look like from a building decarbonization space? Or we have our technical friends, our architects and engineers who are not used to that justice-oriented language, right? How do I do that from the space that I sit? So we took some time to get our own definition of equity, even though we have the standard definition of equity. How are we going to work together, coexist together within our coalitional space? So it took like maybe almost 6 months to get to this. But then we said we need to expand. What is equitable building decarbonization? Because everybody, when this came along also when we all saw George Floyd murdered on television, like everybody all of a sudden wanted to throw money at Black and brown organizations, individuals, because of what had happened. And Black people still experience today. And so within our space and our movement, we don't look at this as a one issue, right? Like, this can happen to someone like me or Eddie walk outside the door. That could happen to us, right? And this is like the lived experience of Black and brown communities. So we just couldn't focus in on the climate crisis. We have to focus on this in an intersectional type of way. And so we came up with our own building decarbonization definition of what that looks like. And we had to remove ourselves from equity, because it's the buzzword, and we're going to get another buzzword in the next couple of years, right? I don't know. They eliminating DEI programs everywhere, so I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, I know what's going on. But so we came up with this definition, but when we were talking about this, we wanted to get people thinking futuristically of what we want to see our communities look like, right? We want Black, brown, low income communities, because we know they are heavily burdened by these injustices, right? To look at the future in a liberation type of thinking, right? How do we liberate our mind from capitalism, colonialism? That is definitely the center of the climate movement. So if you don't know about that, we do have trainings on climate capitalism and colonialism. So so we can all get together. But I just want to bring that in, because that's going to be our next exercise as a group. And I'm going to bring Eddie back to help us lead that, but I just wanted to put that up there.
Thank you. So our next potential risk and roadblocks. So characteristics of white supremacy go through. 15 characteristics of white supremacy culture that we want to go over. And I'm going to give you a quick disclaimer on this. Again, I talked about my other work that I do as lobbying, and I hear about some of these conversations, and not only in my state capital, but in Washington, D.C., when you go and talk to some of the politicians about, if they don't have anybody to sounding the horn in their communities, then they're less likely to vote anything that's going to be of support and equitable for anything. And that's coming straight out of their mouths. Some of the folks some of the representatives, senators that I've talked to. So, unless there's somebody beating the drum in the communities and saying, look, if you don't do this, we're going to stop supporting this, or somebody's not going to give to your campaign, they're just going to vote however way the party's voting. That's basically how it goes. So, but getting back to the slide is just a few of them: perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, only one right way, paternalism, either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict. I'm going to go back to that power hoarding one. That goes back to who can write the biggest check. So if they've already been getting the work, or they've already been getting all the favors in the past, if they can continue to write the biggest check, then they're going to have the most power. So that's just something to think about as we're looking at what's equitable and what's not equitable. Individualism, I'm the only one. Progress is bigger, more objectivity, and right to comfort are just some of the characteristics of this. The importance of slowing down. These characteristics can show up in any person's work and or organization, regardless of their skin color. We're experiencing a sense of urgency because the climate crisis is accelerating, and we always hear that we need to act now to make a difference. Perfectionism and quantity over quality show up when we are competing against other organizations for funding. We can feel defensive when someone criticizes our work because we put so much of ourselves into what we do. And that goes back to another thing we talk about in our Friday meetings as a team. We talk about how is the work, each one of our jobs on the team, how are we actually rating ourselves to actually know we're getting the work done? Who's benefiting? How are we hearing back from our folks that we're doing the work with? And then how are we looking at ourselves in the community that we serve and our partners? How are they feeling satisfied? Is there more work to do? How are we rating ourselves to make sure that we can continue to do the work that we need to do? How can we combat these characteristics? By slowing down, working intentionally, and building relationships with others. Now, this is the exercise. This is the exercise that we're going to do right now with the folks at your table. We have papers at each table and markers. And so we're going to talk. Okay. So we're gonna see at each table. Want you guys to work together. It's gonna be about 30-minute exercise. And we want you guys to figure out what your own version or your definition of equity is. So with those at your table, and for those of you, does everybody got? Yeah. You can swing over there and you can swing over there. So I think we got a full house here. So everybody should be able to contribute to that. So we're gonna take about 30 minutes, guys, and then we're gonna come back after that.
Can I join you now? Scare you. Right?
We have a seat too. No.
Yeah, so I think we all get to be at that. Oh, yeah, I'm on our own first. Okay.
Michael, I'm gonna take that seat.
I think we are on.
Reach people.
Yeah, it looks like we're doing some of our own work first and. Well, I'll just write one for the both of you and I'll pass this to the next. Yeah, I got my own post-it notes over here. Love your.
Yeah, Lisa's right.
I can tell from here.
Mine. Thanks for running praise.
Yeah, no, yeah, I.
Share and break brains for me now.
I need one. Yeah.
So I can.
I work up here.
My post-it would say fairness.
Yes. I know the phrase I wrote was leveling the.
Providing appropriate resources.
Data. Should we go ahead and put this on our paper? Capture everything.
Oh, I guess this is our.
Yeah, I
This is our goal.
Yeah.
Could also
Yes.
rip this. If we needed it.
Yeah, I think we're
Lean on the thing.
it's running low and then writing our ideas and then.
Post it.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to work it.
I feel like
Fill on it, so I'm gonna.
equity on this side of the table.
If you want to add to that one.
You can do word or phrase.
I just locked my hand.
For one more.
There's a little,
phrase.
there's a lock on your bottom if you want to lock it from the outside wheel. It's mine.
I was trying to move.
And we can set them on here. Yeah.
If anyone needs more markers or Post-its or anything, just like let us know.
Post-its.
Okay, she's grabbing some, so they'll be here soon. I'll make sure you get some. Oh. Oh,
I didn't realize that's what-
Yeah.
Please. Soccer team.
Small car.
Work is really great. Three teams.
Yes, we have new people joining.
Opportunity.
You want to start? I know you got cut off last time in your introduction.
Hey, I'm Alex, at U Wilmington, studying economic consulting, sustainable business, minoring in environmental sustainability studies. And I care a lot about equitability in my personal life as well as the work that I'm trying to do on my group.
Interested in this then? Or?
Diversity and scholarship.
That's how I was doing it.
Really?
Provide accessibility.
I think we're getting less meaningful for other things. I think, but
Youth and as well as.
And out.
And what I would be doing is going out to like local boys and girls club and trying to see help to those.
Yeah, this is good for.
take another one.
Don't have all of the privileges. that I have. And last week I also applied to the DEI position.
I
Impact, which is our state business club on campus. So,
here's the thing that happened.
I put it.
Good, at least
Some change.
Yeah, thanks for letting me join
where
Lana Cross.
I will have.
Talked about the photo a while ago.
Redlining.
I'm with.
Like.
Good.
That happened. Like, are they immune or of that because of.
Undo the damage.
There we go.
Undo
Nice.
historic wrong. Reparation.
It's like a time.
I gave a relatively long introduction earlier. I'll keep it really short.
I said, that might be, something that's meaningful. I said knowledge sharing, like having.
I also did pretty
That and sharing what.
Seems ability here.
Said.
I don't need-
It's like lived experience, it's definitely something
Yeah,
that's on.
yeah.
More you can work.
Yeah.
Making sure that. obviously everybody-
My name is Steve Robert. I work for IUT, Institute for Market or National. On building, existing buildings.
These are my mind, I always.
To come at it through a couple of key areas, but I work on.
Say that again, man.
The curb cut. Our headquarters is in Kingston. I live out there. I know a lot of your teams.
You guys just came out with version 5, I believe.
We did yesterday morning.
Five is actually.
Just yesterday morning. Well, the beta, you know, the
Gotcha.
things out. So yes, Long time coming. Majorly focused on decarbonization.
Honestly.
Please.
Norman College, I'm a green.
Sense to development.
So I'm the senior director for energy and sustainability.
I put a lot of their most fair shot, like at her, like a plus now.
You're right.
Everyone.
Thanks for a while. Resilience funding hub.
About to say, is handwriting.
Always staying our collective somewhere in the same line.
Also part of a program that is in climate fellows, and there happens to be two in the state.
Yes.
Decarbonization.
There is a thing.
Not table. And I think this is what our population are in urbanized areas, and so their connection to farms or rural strong, and so whole segment of the country that's not
Characters.
need.
Yeah. No, several, but I was like.
Yeah.
Like things.
Each other.
Even like right now, like, you know, with us, like there's this urgent, we need to take action, get together and we should do it by that time. But it's like, some for some, like the intentionality of
All of
go down and do. They don't know how to get rid of it, like. What do we wear? Like, that's fine.
providing appropriate resources and.
Part of the problem.
Yeah, cause I mean,
It's like, imagine, to what part,
And so it's giving them the right resources. It's giving them what you think they need that actually help.
Yes.
Feel synergy.
Yeah.
Be a lot.
The urgency.
Right.
That intention.
we're gonna shop.
Princess. I know our next post-it was, time and place. Was that your?
We talk a lot about.
We're kind of expanding.
And it's like we've been understanding the landscape too. Like.
So don't overthink this, okay? This takes months, okay?
You said 10 minutes.
It's gonna be okay. You got 5 minutes left though.
About like.
We're gonna take.
It's not about fairness through
Yeah.
time.
Don't be urgent, but be urgent.
Just need water. Gonna buy the plastic.
So I looked at it, I was like,
What was happening
sure.
in place and
Acknowledging that.
I hope so.
sometimes call them frontline communities that are most at risk. What I wrote down. Assist, patient, being able to share. I think so often we.
So we're.
Like that. I'm.
Ask them for the lawyer.
You are onto something. I like that you hear this.
You actually involve the community. So I can tell them what they need to do. You actually they have to be a part of it.
Ability with.
See what they need.
Have.
I like all the tie-ins of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Haley, you're closest to the.
Oh, is it?
Is this one?
To the.
Definition has a measure.
Yeah, it's hard to get everything.
I know that.
Yeah.
Weather.
Accommodating.
Time.
Yeah.
We have time there.
Throwing that out there, that's why I
Measure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, I know how they grade. They're
Yeah.
gonna say, come back and say. they're
I can't remember what it was. Conditions for everyone.
So knowing your audience right there.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm gonna start just like writing.
Yeah.
That's a marker.
Oh, that's really. We could-
I didn't quite.
prompt, but I just wrote an equity statement. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
To see.
address.
Screenshots. I took a lot of pictures.
Oh.
I take notes and I right in
Yeah.
I chicken scratch my board.
Internal actions we can take. To address
Oh, I'm gonna, my email.
the next
Sure, I'll send you this.
external actions. we can-
So one of the hacks.
Bill was saying about is,
Yeah, I'm ready.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I will.
historical has to be more than just an acknowledgement of the-
Yeah.
especially for those communities. I mean, fossil fuels, I mean, fossil fuel companies, we're gonna leave these communities high and dry. I mean, just transition that we're.
That we, right.
Going to leave
Have to say we're good.
like people are.
Yeah.
That will get left behind.
So it's not a relative.
No, I was named by a nurse in the hospital. My mom did not know that much English, so she's like, I got an easy name that's easy to tell, but also like pretty. She's like, yeah, and I'm like, it's just.
Oh, yeah, right. And the dog.
Available, 5 letters.
Here.
Generational.
Those barrier time, so
I know that coming into them, I was.
You can't expect huge, huge identity. If you take away someone's livelihood.
A lot of.
I did wanna see.
Maybe that Linda.
Yeah, that'd be
Should be these companies.
No, I would not.
There's like
And the funny thing is I do a lot of.
Like we use it.
And when.
All right, everybody, we're gonna come back together here. Are we still writing? Do we need a few more minutes to write or are we good? You need another minute? Yeah, I'll give you 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes.
Right.
That's right.
Community engagement, I mean. More about like.
Dark injustice.
Yeah.
These communities don't need to be saved. Not that they need engagement. A lot of communities are- We want to.
Yeah.
Like moving.
And,
Community engaged to.
I'm bound.
Ways.
Why?
Which is hard to implement.
It would not be a definition.
Power in that dynamic.
Not a goal.
Institutional standpoint,
True.
communities,
Yeah,
very hard to.
yeah, I would say
Just now, I
find
mean.
something. I want
IRA.
to be like.
Real dollars available now for co-government. How do you do that?
You know, like.
Is this like higher is a 1?
Oh.
Getting at, but like, I think like we're gonna have that. Make up the math, performance power.
I'm doing. I know you from, Barnville, Barnville Service.
Oh. Trying to get our life.
I heard from you.
Right.
I was like.
All right, so we're gonna start on this side of the room and work our way all the way back at this table here. So, you guys are gonna share with me first, so how did you guys define?
Accountability. I'll try to rewrite it.
So I guess our top 3 were availability and accessibility of resources, transparency, communication, and intentionality.
Was everybody able to hear that? Nobody, was it, okay. All right, we're gonna keep moving around and I'm gonna ask you some questions after this. So, next table.
So our definition is kind of split into 2 parts. One is what equity is, how it's accomplished, and it kind of just came out of us brainstorming big words that come out that come to mind when we think of equity. So our definition reads, equity is the intentional expansion of access to resources, information, and opportunities that enable or empower frontline/impacted communities to practice self-determination. This is accomplished through transparent, accountable, authentic collaboration.
Sandra there. Here we go. Next table.
You guys are all doing great. You guys are-
Ours is not as long. Ours is undoing historic injustice by increasing accessibility and opportunity outcomes that benefit all.
All right, this table here. Manish, you'll get okay.
Yeah.
Our group spent a lot of time brainstorming, so we don't have a comprehensive definition, but we do have some key terms that we think could provide for a definition. So first was really looking at place and where equity is being addressed and being practiced. So really first developing those place-based definitions of really what fairness is. Not only community engagement, but also co-governance. So taking that up to the next step and how we can empower individuals and amplify voices without speaking. And then also we said it was very important to acknowledge and address the historical inequities that have occurred previously, to address them and move forward with community members, and especially in decarbonization, making it more equitable.
Hi, everybody, my name's Terry. Our group came up with rooted in love and care for humanity. Work to achieve accountability for the past and to ensure fair access to opportunities and outcomes in the future.
Barry? Who's reading over here?
We said equity was to engage communities to prioritize issues and remove barriers to achieve fairness, justice, and access.
All right, you ready to bring it home?
Yeah. Oh man, we're last. Okay. Yeah, we were also still brainstorming, but we had 3 schools of thought with it, and so one of them co-designing solutions that align with community priorities. And then we have like a reestablishing balance, power sharing and shifting, justice, and believe what has always been done. And then we had removing existing barriers, and the real effort to make it a reality, and having access.
All right, everybody give yourself a round of applause. Yes, that was awesome. And this is very important to, we're trying to find equity to bring people together. So one, you guys did great. It took us 6 months to get the language together. Yes, okay. You know, it's coming. So we have one of our members here who actually was, are you on the phone?
That was yesterday.
Okay. She was a part of this experience of defining equity within our coalition space. So it's like, Linda, could you just give us a small testimony? We don't have to go into a whole, you know, like, why is it important to have shared language in defining when you bring in different people together? Nope, you can't hold the mic. Nope.
I can fix it.
Here you go. Here you go.
Okay,
I just, here you go.
it's important to have shared language so that there can be a connection of understanding, a translator from the data people, the science people, the techie people, to the lived experience people. And on top of that, an action item that fits a community that's gonna verbalize what their needs are. No helicoptering solutions to communities.
You should draw that up.
Okay, so yeah, and this is important around equity, and the pitfalls of not doing things in an equitable way. With our Pembroke Hopkins Park electrification pilot project, that we bring out to this historically, CDC in Kankakee County, to the electrification pilot project. And so the important part of this project was because we had to build trust. We had to build trust as a coalition, coming in, having them be a part of the process, us helping with technical assistance, us helping with understanding the stories of the community, because by the way, in this community, there is the Nicor gas pipeline, which some of the residents are and were in opposition of the pipeline, but then also some were like for it because they did not really know the impacts of another gas pipeline in their community. And so with equity concerns and making sure that we have community organizations like CDC, Pembroke Hopkins Park, in the decision-making process of how we're going to do this, right? Because they did not know a lot about electrification, building decarbonization. So I had to get people trained up, give them the opportunity to tell them their story, right? Because those stories are very important when we're talking about equity in any movement, right? And so I think Eddie had a question for you because, okay, never mind. Well, is your question? Oh, yeah, so, yeah. So this is why it's important, to center communities, when we are doing community, organizing and projects in communities. No helicoptering, no missionary type of work. And that with equity being at the forefront and in the decision-making process, this program was very successful because they got community engaged and they're definitely autonomous doing their own thing now. And so that's why we had you all define your own definition of equity. And that's why I said, let it happen organically because it takes time. You guys did quite well. But then also we want this is a transformational type of work. And so if you don't have buy-in from the communities or even yourselves, or maybe you want to believe it, then nothing's going to really happen. And so Eddie had some questions for us.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
About community engagement and what you did with this particular community? I know you mentioned like just training up. So what are other ways that you engage the community and change?
Well, of course, you have to do the assessment on the community, right? I mean, and they are the ones who are in the community. I'm from Michigan, they're Illinois, right? So it's like, it don't look like I'm coming over there. It's like, I'm in Pontiac, Michigan. That's me going to Detroit. I know about Detroit, but I would never do that, right? And so community engagement, of course, supplying the resources, but then also, I only visited. Okay, that's all I did, and I was there to speak on behalf of what building decarbonization is doing the 101. Why is it important? What does this have to do with climate change and all that? I did all that. But also do an assessment of your community. Why is this important? What are the threats? We know the gas pipeline was a threat. We also knew that our own people were the threat because we weren't educated about the impacts of the gas pipeline, or economics was a threat because a lot of people can't afford to get their home electrified. So there's a lot of different things in regards to, you know, outside of training them up. It was a lot of different pieces on bringing people together. So it's not just going to happen overnight. It took some trial and error. I'll say that. I'll be honest. Trial and error to figure out what's the best way, because when they finally got to the point of the audits on the homes, some people were skeptical about the contractors going into the homes. Then they heard all about the information about the Nicor gas pipeline, which does supply jobs. Okay, so that's where us activists have to come to grips with. These polluting entities, they bring jobs. Okay, and so when you're in a community that's struggling economically, which one do you think is going to happen? Even Eddie mentioned West Virginia. Coal miners, I testified at a hearing in West Virginia years ago. They were like, well, how are we gonna live if there's no jobs, right? So that's something that we have to really figure out really quickly about jobs. So yes, it was a lot of trial and error, trying to figure out how to get community more engaged. But as these two individuals, Jahari and Lee, they went out to the community, they brought me in to speak, just to, you know, get some extra support. People became trusted. They started to get traction. I don't know if you all were in the session with Naomi Davis, building partnership, having cross coalitions in the state of Illinois to help support their cause, it became more known that there were trusted individuals and not people not trying to, because you have some solar companies coming door to door knocking on your door. They thought maybe this was going to be the same thing, but then they knew, but it was free. So they were also skeptical about that. So the key point in which you take away is just building those relationships. That's the first thing you got to do. Any other questions before I hand it back over?
Okay, so for the next like maybe 5-10 minutes, I'm gonna ask some questions. I'm gonna choose somebody to respond back with an answer, and then we're gonna wrap it up from there. So based on what you guys just did with their interactive actor groups there, look at a broader thing in the community. What happens if everyone isn't defining equity the same way? Somebody's coming from, they might all live in the same community, but they might be from different socioeconomic backgrounds or different lived experiences, things like that. So anybody want to volunteer to just give an answer to that question?
So you think about what you just did, like within this.
In this group setting just now. Okay. We'll just pass the mic around as our man.
I face this a little when I'm talking with some of my donors at my institute who don't feel the way that I do about equity and especially racial equity. They just see it very differently. And I can think of one guy in particular where I struggled through a conversation with him because he's a major donor and I don't want to lose that support, but I also don't want to compromise our values. And we've come to a place where we understand that we feel differently, but we know where our common ground is. And I think landing on that common ground was really important. We were in a conversation where things were kind of going weird. I was with a couple other people on the staff and he mentioned coal communities. And I knew we weren't going to agree on everything, but my boss realized like, hey, this is something that we can all connect on. And she had ties to it. And so we found that common ground and we were able to kind of share more about why we were coming from this perspective and wanting more racial equity. And he was able to meet us where he was in terms of his compassion for coal communities and Native American communities and things that I didn't realize he was caring about more than I didn't think he cared about it as much as he did. So once we found that common ground, we were kind of able to pull these other commonalities out.
What about how do you navigate tension when it feels like the concerns of community groups aren't 100% aligned when eliminating building emissions as quickly as possible? So somebody may have an agenda where we're trying to get to a certain thing, we have some money to spend to get some programs out there, but the community isn't reacting fast enough in order to get the money spent. So anybody want to answer that question? What does it feel like for the concerns of the community groups aren't 100% aligned with eliminating building emissions as quickly as possible? We're gonna keep the mic in the audience.
I was like, I can shout. I made it. Well, I think the first thing I thought of when you said that was asking community group, what are your concerns? What are your needs? And having that conversation to start to think about, okay, how can we respond and work collectively to address those immediate needs? So one of the things that I thought of when you mentioned jobs, and this is, I'm totally using a phrase that I got yesterday, and I point him out and attribute him to it, a climate smart workforce. So as we think about decarbonizing buildings and the need in communities where these buildings, we want to decarbonize them, about jobs, well, who can we train to learn how to do this stuff from the community so that those jobs get created? So I think thinking about our solutions and how those solutions can also respond to the community's needs, and coming up with solutions together.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Pass the mic, pass the mic.
Just to build on that, and to your question, I totally agree. Obviously, sometimes the obvious question, people are afraid to ask that obvious question, like, what are your concerns? Ask that. One example I'll use is, my colleague Linda is here. We're both from St. Louis. We're going through an initiative right now where our organization is gonna be doing a partnership with Linda's organization. We're gonna fund them. But I've slow walked that because Linda doesn't know me. I don't know Linda. So we've taken time to do that. And I've been from the outside, it might not look like there's a fit for her organization to work within our federal grant project. So it's more of like giving her the discretion, like, I'm gonna give you the goals, the outcomes, the statement of project objectives, the approach, the strategy. Like, do you see yourself fitting within this model? And if you don't, fine, we'll try and find someone else. So for larger institutions like us, like, don't force it. Like, you have your own self-interest, but like, put your self-interest aside for the purposes of the project that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Just real quick, and there's nothing wrong with asking communities to prioritize. I think communities understand that the best. And so it just to say that sometimes we just have to do that because there's only so much time in the day.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, it relates to community groups. Like, we're looking at the historical impacts, as I mentioned earlier, about, you have to take all those things. Unfortunately, everybody has to figure out, like she said, a common ground so that everybody can work together. You're not gonna please this person, you're not gonna please that person. But if you can find some commonalities, then we can get, some work done. The risk of inequitable work, energy burden, displacement, redlining, health hazards, depending on where the setup of the community is. Sometimes, like back in, they're trying to get the energy efficiency up, but they're about to open back up a power plant that's right on the riverfront, right in Detroit, Michigan. And that was the same power plant that was shut down 10 years ago that displaced some people in that area. And there was a massive lawsuit where the power plant was sued for millions of dollars because people were, there was a meltdown at the power plant and, people lost their homes and some other stuff. So it's just, sometimes, we think about certain issues to kind of bring back up, ways to be energy efficient, and then we're bringing jobs back. But then we got to look at historical things. Why was that thing shut down or taken out of the community? Because it caused a hazard to that community that was displaced. So we just got to think about those sorts of things, and that sometimes those folks in those situations, like whether it be, city officials or the business community, they are both trying to figure out how to bring those things together. So, if we know that working equitably is the right thing to do, why aren't we all doing it? What makes it hard to do this work equitably? What roadblocks come up for you in this work? So think about what you were saying about the donor, thinking about what you guys are talking about in St. Louis and what you're doing. Give me another example of, what do you think, what else would be a reason why, a couple of reasons why we aren't doing it? Is it, like you said, not having the hard conversations? We know we need to have them, but we don't want to hurt feelings. We don't want to miss out on money to continue our mission or our work that we're doing. What do you guys, outside of those things, are there anything else you guys contribute to why we're not having those conversations?
One I would say is political will. So you can have your team assembled, you can have the money, you can have a really detailed plan for how you're gonna do it, but like, if your local leaders are not willing to support on it, then what do you do there? I mean, I think for a lot of them too, I bet I used to work for the city of St. Louis, I bet there's people here who've worked for government too. For them, it's always like, in my St. Louis experience, there's just a lot of people who are in those positions of power and leadership. It's still really indicative of St. Louis. There's too much still self-interest. So, yeah, you may have a great concept for being able to decarbonize 2 to 4 unit buildings or affordable buildings in St. Louis, but what's the political blowback going to happen to me for this project? And if that will is not there, then that's another factor that will dishearten communities and sow further distrust in your local government.
Wait.
Maybe you have some steps.
Thank you. I also live and work in St. Louis, and I feel like we're painting a little bit of a grim picture right now, but I promise it's a beautiful and wonderful. Everyone should visit.
We all have our bad sides of our city.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone here can understand. And kind of on a similar note, I was thinking about lack of trust is a big barrier to my equity work. I work for a national network.
The Midwest is often overlooked by national networks, and the reception that I think very fairly I frequently get from a lot of the people I'm working with is, do you actually have any stake in this? Do you actually care about this community, or are you gonna come in and leave it a year? And then we also have internal distrust, right? And using St. Louis as a case study, like there is a lot of sort of political willpower that's gotten lost over the past few years, and that really has disheartened people and made them lose trust in government. And it's hard to work from a place where everybody's so splintered, for these big grant applications, you have to come together and apply, but we're not talking to each other. So that's been a big barrier.
You guys work with a St. Louis folks. You guys work with a guy named Adam Lane, treasurer in St. Louis.
Oh,
Define work with.
Do you work on a regular basis? We see the same building.
you're not.
You don't? Okay, all right.
You know.
Sorry about that distraction.
Active projects.
I was just gonna say that what I see is the primary reason, and it's connected to everything that's been said here so far, that we have not and are not achieving equity is because we're proposing a radical shift in the power structure, right? And folks understand that very clearly. And so there are these desperate acts to cling on to that power to preserve that self-interest. And so that's it, right? I mean, what we're proposing is beautiful and wonderful and also incredibly radical in that power domain. You had a.
You go back to that white supremacy culture slide.
Actually, we're going right to that just
Reading
now.
my mind. I was gonna say, thank you so much, everyone, for speaking. Oh, did you have something to add?
Yes, sorry, I guess I just wanted to mention, exactly, the power structures, our government, historically leaving everyone out. And also a huge thing that popped in my brain was funding and funders. The lack of flexibility we have to adjust to what people are asking us for when we engage in those conversations, and having that somehow match up to a grant that has very specific asks and reporting needs, and like qualitative results. And so, I mean, we can't, the way that it is equitable to maneuver ourselves and behave doesn't match up with the resources we have to provide. Like nothing is flexible.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing on that. And it really does line up. So I'm gonna wrap us up real quickly, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A still at the end with our team. But I wanted to hit on this again. I know we showed it earlier, but I totally recommend you all to look up these characteristics of white supremacy culture and get familiar with them and how they show up in your organization, in your work, maybe in yourself. And I also like to preface this with saying, like, white supremacy, I mean, sounds obviously horrible. So like these are aspects of our culture that are baked into our culture, baked into how we get grant funding, how we compete for those grants so that we can do the work. This idea, like just so many of these are what we've talked on, this sense of urgency, which is it's so tense because the climate crisis is urgent. Doing this work is urgent. But when you slow down to build trust, like we've all talked about, to find those shared languages, like those shared definitions, it can really make a huge difference. But like these things are really often at odds with one another. And I think just familiarizing yourself with these characteristics and then seeing when they show up and seeing how they show up for you. Maybe some of them you don't really relate to, but some of them you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I have that individualism, or yeah, I'm afraid of open conflict. Just like noticing them first and beginning to work through them is huge when we're doing this work for equity.
Okay, and so when we say white supremacy culture, we're not talking about white supremacists, okay? We're talking about the culture, like we're embedded into white supremacy culture. We all, Black, brown, we all, white people, we all can perpetuate these cultures, okay, these characteristics. So I just want to be clear about that. Because our white friends may say, hey, it's just us, like, no. Everybody, we all do it. Okay, I just look at me perfectionism. Like, oh my gosh, I gotta get it right. I gotta get it right down. It's not really. You can't get it right. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
And just like Marnie said too, it's like the culture that we're all in. It's like, I don't know if you guys know that thing, but it's like the fish can't see the water because it's like what they're swimming in. Like this is what we're all swimming in right now. So I think it's also really easy to be like, this is just how it is. Oh, I want to get this funding. Oh, I want to work in an organization. I need to, get urgent. I need to be a perfectionist. I need to make sure there's only one right way to do these things and it's my way. But that's not how it has to be. And I think, yeah, we're just hearing more and more about like, overturning these things is radical, and that's why it's hard. Like, we had a lot of recognition of that in the room today. All right, and so that is really the gist of it for our workshop today. Thank you so much, everyone who shared their equity definitions. We're gonna make sure to get photos of these and share them out afterwards so that you can see the other groups. I encourage you as we leave today, maybe take a minute, walk around, see what everyone else had. And this is how you can connect with Midwest BDC if you're interested in our work. You can find us at midwestdecarb.org. We're on all social medias, and that's our email list. And then we also have, I think, a little bit of time left for some Q&A. Yeah, we have like 8 minutes. So if there's any questions, feel free. I can drop the mic around. So raise your hand.
Anybody have anything? Anybody have any thoughts that we?
Your empowerment grants, what kind of projects are you finding are the most successful, and then are there any failures?
Is definitely successful because they have going on to receive, more funding at the federal level. Our last iteration of grants, the pilot projects, the education in the community, because we have to get the community levels funding on all these issues. So we read a lot of the organizations have did education series, seminars on, for example, the healthy home rebates that's going on at the state levels in different states. So I think those are successful because the first step of equity and getting people part of the decision-making process, you have to get people. So I think that's has been one of our successes. Failure is that we need to keep getting funded. Like, I don't understand. like if we have a small team, it's like expanded to like it's 6 of us, right?
Now it is.
It's 6 now, and it started like with 3. And I don't understand, like, we read grants out, right? We have a whole process, the evaluation, we have the application process, and then we get the money out. It's just pretty simple. Small application, tell us what you're gonna do, we grant the money out. We have a check-in process, and then we have a final report, so we can highlight everything that's going on, okay? I don't understand. Why is it hard for funders and foundations to do this work from where they sit? And they have twice, triple the staff that we do, and we do it. I don't understand that. However, just keep giving us the money. So I think that's a failure. I think that's a failure of the whole foundational system. Like they gotta get it together, but that's fine. Just re-grant out to us. We'll get the money out. No problem.
Anybody else have any?
Sounds like you're a pretty new organization. Could you tell us a bit about how the coalition formed, and you recently became a standalone nonprofit, right?
I guess I've been here since the beginning. So, okay. The coalition is was a project of the Energy Foundation. That's who funds us. And so before we came our 501c3 on February 1st, we were under the physical sponsor of Fresh Energy in Minnesota. And so during that time to 2019, I wasn't even on staff yet. They focused on our district energy initiative, our heat pump initiative, just a lot of different projects and figuring out like what work they were going to do within the coalition space. That didn't happen. Right. And so they had to go, I think right before they were going to hire me, they were going to have an in-person convening. And then I came on that fall, November 2020. Like other organizations that are wanted to do equity work, they were lacking Black, Brown, Indigenous people of color. So yes, I got hired to do all of that work. We spent a lot of time structuring the coalition, like how do we coexist together? We got to slow down. I told a lot of the members that I will lose some of you all because I'm gonna have to let you know, if you're gonna talk about equity, we gotta talk about white supremacy culture, okay? So that's fine. You may not be ready for it, but we will welcome you back when you're ready, okay? So we spent a lot of time structuring the coalition, creating working groups to do the work, figuring out how we're gonna do the work in a pandemic, okay? And then also continue to engage individuals, organizations, and communities. So we create a lot of the structural stuff to get a coalition going. So. My question is.
New.
Oh,
Newbies.
Outreach engagement. And so I come from organizing. I was at the NAACP prior to my position. And so I already had a lot of connections within the Midwest and the Plain States. Hi, Kansas. And so I already had a lot of connections within that. So I just brought my people along. That's what you do. You bring people to the party, right? You don't hold it all together, right? And so we started defining what equity is, how we're gonna coexist together. And so we brought on Jacob, our director of policy and politics. What is this called? Policy and projects. Oh my gosh, I did that. Okay, I did that. That's my fault because I wanted to have this crazy title. And then Maggie came on as our communication staff. And then when we became official, we brought Eddie on as our development director. So Fresh Energy really held the space of the operations, the accounting, the development. So FYI, if you guys are ever deciding to start your own thing, yeah, kind of be under another nonprofit so you can know the ropes. So we became our own stuff in February, and so we launched and we're about to go do this whole strategic planning, staffing up, we're hiring, we posting another position soon. If anybody's interested, so we continue doing the work. No, it wasn't easy, y'all. Any other questions? Oh, and membership is free. Okay, we don't be charging people. Just want people to get to work. Just get to work, y'all. So thank you all for attending. If there's no other questions, we will have 3 minutes back.